And good evening. We are now less than 7 days away from those critical midterm elections. The balance of Congress and the future of President Biden's agenda all at stake. And here's where we stand right now. Democrats currently control the House of Representatives, but come Tuesday, all 435 seats are up for grabs. Republicans will need to flip just 5 of those seats currently held by Democrats to gain control there, an outcome that polls say is looking more and more likely by the day. And in the Senate, Dems holding an even smaller majority. In fact, the smallest possible majority. The upper chamber split evenly, 50-50. You see it right here, with Vice President Kamala Harris serving as that tie-breaking vote. Republicans would need to gain just 1 seat to flip the balance of power there. Our team is live on the ground in the battleground states that will likely determine the fate of Congress. Jesse Kirsch in Ohio, Dasha Burns in Pennsylvania with that new poll. The Senate race locked in a dead heat. And Ellison Barber in Georgia with complete coverage. But we begin first in Florida, where the president is tonight making a final push to galvanize Democratic voters. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander leads us off.
President Biden tonight trying to rally Democrats here in Florida just 1 week until the critical midterms. Set to appear with gubernatorial candidate Charlie Crist and Senate candidate Val Demings.
This ain't your father's Republican Party. This is a different deal right now.
Polls here show Republicans, Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Marco Rubio with the lead.
These Democrats are with Joe Biden 100% of the time. That's not what we want in the state of Florida.
Republicans are looking to capitalize on growing support among a key swing group, Latinos. Here in Florida, a recent Telemundo LX News poll shows DeSantis leading Crist among Latino voters. Most also support DeSantis' decision to send migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Republican Tony Figueroa, the child of Cuban and Nicaraguan immigrants, telling us he's worried about rising prices.
How is inflation impacting you?
I want to, have my own place, to call my own. Been saving up for that for years now. It just seems with inflation, that goal just seems a little more out of reach day by day.
We also met Democrat Mercedes Paloma, who came here from Cuba when she was just 9. She's worried American democracy is giving way to dictatorship.
In your eyes, in this election, it's democracy that's at stake, no?
Yes, it is, because it's become the truth versus lies. And when you have a binary situation, that's where you have a problem, when violence becomes the recourse to a voting democracy.
Then there's Ivan Nieves, a Miami bistro owner who calls himself an independent. He voted for President Biden in 2020 and says he's not satisfied with the results, telling us he's now undecided.
You feel stuck in the middle.
Right. I think I haven't seen that person. I haven't seen that honestly, that vibe that says, like, okay, I'm going to do things differently.
There are at least 9 tight races that could determine control of the Senate, and key governors' matchups, too. In Arizona, Republican Kari Lake facing fierce criticism for this joke about rising crime and the attack on Paul Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi, well, she's got protection when she's in D.C. Apparently her house doesn't have a lot of protection.
And Tom, tonight we're here in Miami where President Biden is preparing to rally Democrats, but it's President Obama that may be the party's best surrogate right now. President Obama will be traveling to the key battlegrounds this week, like Nevada and Arizona, before campaigning alongside President Biden this weekend in Pennsylvania. Tom?
Yeah, the former president making the closing argument there. All right, Peter, thank you for that. And as I mentioned, we have reporters in key battleground states tonight around the country. In Georgia, more than 1.6 million people have already voted early. NBC's Ellison Barber is in Somerville, Georgia there. Ellison, we know the big headline out of Georgia's Senate race has to do with Republican candidate Herschel Walker. Now a second woman claiming Walker urged her to have an abortion about 30 years ago. Jane Doe, as she's chosen to refer to herself, went on camera today and shared her story with ABC News. Let's take a look.
He was very clear that he did not want me to have the child. And he said that because of his wife's family and powerful people around him, that I would not be safe and that the child would not be safe.
Okay, Ellison, so what is the Walker campaign saying today?
So Walker is again denying these allegations. He's saying that he does not know this woman. In a statement from his campaign, he said this in part, quote, "This was a lie a week ago, and it is a lie today." 7 days before an election, the Democrats trot out Gloria Allred and some woman I do not know. "My opponents will do and say anything to win this election." When you look at the polls, it doesn't seem like these allegations are really deterring Walker's key supporters. He is a staunch anti-abortion candidate, but this doesn't seem to be having the impact that I think his Democratic opponent would like to see it have on this race. In the latest AJC poll, Walker and incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock remain in a statistical tie. Walker at 46%, Warnock at 45%. They're a fraction of a percentage point apart and within the margin of error. That being said, according to this poll from the AJC, there is a small but significant portion of Republican-leaning voters saying that they are going to withhold support for Herschel Walker. According to this poll, 6% of people supporting incumbent Republican Governor Brian Kemp said they will vote for Warnock, not Walker, in the Senate race, and an additional 5% said they're planning to vote for the Libertarian candidate in this race, Chase Oliver. Tom, in a tight race like this, those numbers, that 11%, give or take, is a really big deal. And remember, in order for the candidates to avoid a runoff election here, they have to pass a 50% threshold.
That could make all the difference in this race. That's a very interesting stat you just pointed out there. And Ellison, going back to early voting, President Biden and Democrats were really concerned about voting rights in the state of Georgia. But we're seeing record-breaking numbers nationally and there in Georgia. What are you hearing from early voters in that state about why they're voting early and the issues that are important to them?
Yeah, so over 1.6 million Georgians have voted early and in person. That is up 400,000 compared to early voting in 2018. There is still a question right now of whether or not we're seeing turnout increase overall here, or if this is just part of a pattern where after COVID-19, people have adjusted the way that they vote. Ultimately, we'll figure that out come Election Day. But right now, when we're talking to Georgia voters, they seem to be incredibly engaged in this race, particularly the Senate race, which is what I have been focused on here in Georgia for the last couple of months. They say, regardless of political party, that their biggest issue headed into the election is the economy. They say they are voting on that right now, and they are looking for answers from both parties. We do hear from Democrats that they see this as a bigger picture fight, the threat of democracy being on the ballot. That's something we've heard President Obama try to really campaign on once he came to this state to help Senator Warnock and convince their base that they have to get out because of that. Tom?
Okay, Ellison Barber, a lot of new reporting out of Georgia tonight for us. Ellison, we appreciate it. We want to head to Pennsylvania now. NBC's Dasha Burns is following the key Senate race there. She's got a bit of breaking news with this new poll. But first, Dasha, I do want to talk about some new sound. Democrat John Fetterman obviously going up against Republican Dr. Oz. Fetterman was on CNN this morning speaking about the fallout from that debate a week ago. And now a new poll is out, released this evening, showing this race is a dead heat. What more can you tell us about this?
Yeah, Tom, we have been waiting for more numbers that incorporate the debate in the polling. And I just got off the phone with Chris Borick, who is the director of the Institute of Public Opinion at Muhlenberg College. He told me that more than half of the interviews in this poll were conducted after the debate. And he tells me that he does believe that that debate made a difference. And I can tell you anecdotally from our conversations with voters, Democrats, Republicans, those folks in the movable middle that are so important, did find themselves sort of taken aback a little bit at that debate, kind of getting a sense of where Fetterman is in his recovery from a stroke. But perhaps even more importantly, I was talking with a lineman, a union worker for the IBEW today, who told me that Fetterman's answer on fracking in that debate was a huge factor for him in deciding that he was going to vote for Oz instead. He was undecided before the debate. Now he's voting for Oz because energy is just such a huge factor here in Pennsylvania. He felt that Fetterman flip-flopped on that issue. So you've got the health factor and some of these actual policy issues that are having an impact in the aftermath of that debate, according to the voters and the experts we've been talking to, Tom.
And Republicans got a bit of good news in the Senate race in that poll, but that poll also showing some bad news for Republicans when it comes to the Pennsylvania governor's race. Let's take a look now. The Democrat there, Josh Shapiro. Wow, look at that spread, beating Republican Doug Mastriano with a 14-point lead. Dasha, you've been in Pennsylvania for weeks now. Explain to our viewers why this ticket might be split. We're going to talk a little more about Chuck across the country, why this is happening in different races. But in Pennsylvania, why is this happening?
Yeah, Tom, this is really fascinating, and we've been focusing on trying to understand why there is such a big difference here between the gubernatorial race and the Senate race. And according to Chris Borick, the pollster we talked to, and other experts and voters we've been talking to here, it does seem to be that this phenomenon is coming out of a primary that produced these more extreme candidates. Doug Mastriano, for the Republican voters that we've been talking to, particularly moderate Republicans, they are having a very hard time voting for a candidate that they feel is too extreme. Josh Shapiro, on the other hand, has done a good job of painting himself as a more moderate candidate, someone who can reach across the aisle. And we've talked to Republican voters who are willing to vote for him. They're voting for Oz for Senate. This may come as a surprise in these polarized times to see folks splitting their tickets like this, but it goes to show, according to experts we've been talking to, that candidate quality really does matter, and Pennsylvania is perhaps the best example of that, Tom.
Okay, Dasha Burns for us tonight from Pennsylvania. Dasha, we thank you. Now to the Senate race in Ohio, and a surprising endorsement. Republican Representative Liz Cheney saying earlier today if she were an Ohio resident, she would vote for Democrat Tim Ryan over Republican J.D. Vance. Let's take a listen.
So who do you prefer in this race? I would not vote for J.D. Vance. Okay. So if you were a Buckeye State voter, you'd be voting for Tim Ryan. I would.
Okay, for more, I want to bring in NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch. Jesse, you know, it's no surprise that Liz Cheney is breaking with the Republican Party again in this way. J.D. Vance definitely is not her type of Republican. But will this move the needle? Sometimes endorsements can help. A lot of times they don't.
Yeah, so, Tom, if you ask the Vance campaign, they're calling this, quote, the kiss of death for Tim Ryan's campaign. Vance's team also pointing to the fact that former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard endorsed Vance earlier today. Ryan, welcomed this endorsement as something seen as reaching across the aisle, and this is the kind of voter that Ryan and Cheney, by extension, are potentially appealing to, which could make the difference here. Ryan has styled himself as someone who can work with people across the aisle. Vance has said he can work with Democrats as well. But Ryan is trying to go for people who might be conservative-minded, but who are sick of Trump. And one of the things that we know that former President Donald Trump is known for are lies about the 2020 election. And that is something that J.D. Vance has signed on to, and something that Representative Cheney has drawn a red line in the sand on. And so if Ryan can pull off over enough voters, whether they think his message on the economy or some other issue sticks out, or if they are sick of some of Trump's qualities, including that election denialism from 2020, if Ryan can pull enough of them over, that can make the difference. And when we look at what else is going on in this state politically, so you have a Republican governor who appears to be coasting to re-election victory, and yet Vance is in this what is seen as a tight race where national Republican money, big-name Republicans have come in to endorse him and spent a lot of time on the trail. And so there's a disparity there. And the question is, who is not voting for J.D. Vance, who might be voting for Governor Mike DeWine? And I know we've spoken with some voters who, as soon as J.D. Vance was the nominee for the Republican nominee for Senate here, Tom, they were immediately like, I'm out, because of some of what he has been tied in with. And so it's a question of how many of those voters are out there, and if that, combined with other things that Tim Ryan might be able to resonate with, can overcome what looks like a state trending Republican.
You know, Jesse, Ohio is one of those states like Florida. You're always looking at it on election night. It's a bellwether. It's a battleground. What are you hearing from voters there as I would say their top three most important issues over and over again?
Yeah, and Tom, I think this state, by the way, has its bellwether status potentially on the line, if not right now, certainly in the next couple cycles to come. It went twice for Obama, then went twice for Trump by bigger margins. So this is a state that, you know, we'll see where the pendulum is swinging next. The biggest thing we keep hearing about from both Vance and Ryan is the economy. Ryan keeps talking about jobs, workers. Those are his buzzwords. For Vance, it's talking about inflation and trying to tie that to Democrats. We also hear both candidates talking about immigration, the border here, because those issues are seen as being tied in with drug problems, fentanyl, coming into this country, and the opioid crisis has hit Ohio so very hard. And then here's one other thing that both of these candidates keep trying to make each other out to be, is an extremist. That word, extremist, is coming from both of these campaigns, and that gets back to this idea that they are potentially fighting for that sliver in the middle, trying to sway people one way or the other, with obviously the party faithful on either side likely locked in, Tom.
All right, Jesse Kirsch, a lot of great reporting out of Ohio for us. Jesse, we appreciate it. It is a fight to the finish for candidates around the country with just 1 week to go until the midterms. I want to bring in NBC News political director Chuck Todd now, who joins us live. Chuck, you know, we went from reporter to reporter, and we got somewhat of a similar story. We haven't even gotten to Arizona yet. But in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and it's what's happening in Arizona as well, we may have a split ticket. I want you to explain to our viewers why in some races, mainly governor's races, Republicans seem to be doing well, but their Senate candidates aren't doing as well. We know in Pennsylvania it's flipped around a little bit, but and in Georgia too. Why exactly are we seeing this?
Well, look, first of all, it's actually not a surprise that you get a split ticket, because in general, voters actually vote on the person for governor more so than Senate most of the time, right? They vote jersey color in Senate races. They're more likely to vote person, which is why you'll see, well, it's why you have a Republican governor of Massachusetts, a Republican governor of Maryland, Democratic governor of Kansas, right? You know, you still, in this cycle, we are likely to see we might see the first Republican governor in Oregon in 40 years. We may see a Democratic governor of Oklahoma, both happening on the same night. So I do think voters take their vote for governor as a much more individual choice. It's less driven by party. Then you ask, well, why are the gubernatorial candidates doing better than the Senate candidates? Well, the Senate candidates, particularly this crop of Senate candidates, you brought up Arizona. Let's go Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. All of them were sort of two of them were in very competitive primaries. They were certainly had some divisiveness within their party. The Trump effect on there makes him a bit more polarizing, a bit more divisive. You know, Dr. Oz, his favorability rating is still underwater. Blake Masters, his favorability rating still underwater. So I think that explains some of it, if you will. And it also explains why have the polls been closing? Well, I think some of those Republicans who were skeptical of Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania are, quote unquote, coming home to vote jersey color because it's a Senate race. And I think that's why you see all of these races in these battleground states looking like they're battleground states.
Yeah. You know, as we move to the House, do you think it's going to be a red wave? Do you think it's going to be a red mirage? Where do you see things going a week out?
Well, I'm not going to pick between either one of those two in that respect, Tom.
It's a binary choice, Chuck. Go for it.
Exactly. No. Yeah, nice try. Look, in the era of polarization, there are some limits either party can make in gains. Take 2018. Here's an election that is seen as very much a Democratic wave election. But remember, it took us 3 days to know that they won 40 House seats, and Republicans ended up netting 2 Senate seats. Part of that had to do with the map. It wasn't a very favorable map for the Democrats. It had a lot of Republican states where Democrats had won some Senate seats. So it was a little bit of a unique situation. But the point is that I also believe polarization kept that Democratic wave from being bigger. And I think that's why, you know, I'm not on the side of, boy, this is going to be 40 or 50 seats and 5 Senate seats. If this were 2010 or the era of 1994, this kind of political environment could deliver that. But in an era of polarization and the fact that both parties are going to turn out, you know, look at Virginia. Virginia a year ago, the Virginia governor's race, to me, that may look like exactly what this national election looks like, which is Democrats got everybody they needed to get out. Republicans just got more people to come out. And rural Virginia came out in numbers we'd never seen before. Northern Virginia, the blue area of the state, came out in very healthy numbers. It was certainly better than what happened in previous governor's races, but it wasn't what the rural turnout was. Well, extrapolate that nationally, Tom, and this is why it is hard to see Republicans doing any worse than 10 to 20 House seats, and why most handicappers are moving their number into the 20 to 30 category, because it does feel as if things have shifted. It doesn't take much to shift things. You know, 1 percentage point shifts 10 House seats. So, you know, and that's maybe even a few more than that. So I think we're looking at something that looks a little bit like what we saw in 2021. A good Republican night, with Democrats hanging in there in some places.
And then finally, who are the groups of voters you're going to look to see who turns out? We've done a lot of reporting on Hispanic voters, but last week you reminded me of the urban areas that did not turn up in 2016. So I'm wondering what are the groups that you're going to be looking at in a week?
It is on the Democratic side. It's African American voters and young voters. You know, in 2018, Democrats got the biggest age group they win with are voters under 30. And right now, it only looks like about 1 in 4 of those voters are going to show up to the polls. In 2018, 1 out of 3 young voters showed up. And while that wasn't as good as the other age categories, it was the best turnout among young voters for a midterm in at least 2 decades. I don't know if we're going to see that number. If we do, then Democrats are going to be a lot more competitive than we thought. As for African American turnout, you know, Philadelphia is going to be the best test of this. Democrats need a lead of about 400 to 450,000 vote lead out of Philadelphia County, Tom. If they're not getting numbers like that, we're going to sit there and say they have an African American turnout issue. So those are the two on the Democratic side. And on the Republican side, you know, without Trump on the ballot, do these Trump voters show up? They showed up for Glenn Youngkin without Trump campaigning, so that was the first time we saw that. But in 2018, there was some signs that Trump voters, you know, Republicans underperformed in some places in 2018 that they did better in 2020 when Trump's name was on the ballot. That is something I also am curious about, especially in some of these battleground states where Trump has actually been less present of late, particularly the state of Georgia.
Philly could hold a lot of sort of tea leaves, if you will, for other big races. And I'm thinking New York, I'm thinking California. 1,000 people murdered in the last few years in Philadelphia. You wonder how that's going to affect voters as they go into the polls in a week.
Tom, you know that there's something to be said here, that the places where Republicans are poised to make the most gains in the House are in New York, Oregon, California. You brought up Philly, and I'd put that at New Jersey. Sort of, we're seeing a couple places. They may gain 10 House seats, 10 to 15 House seats in just those 3, and it's all because they're running campaigns essentially against those cities, against Portland, against New York City, against San Francisco, and it's working.
All right, Chuck Todd, we thank you, and we're actually going to give Chuck a special thank you, because be sure to tune in to Meet the Press election special tonight with Chuck Todd and Kristen Welker. They'll be on the air pretty soon, 8 p.m. tonight, right here on NBC News Now. Make sure to watch. Okay, next we turn to the Americas and a monster story. Ongoing tensions in Brazil. 2 days after his presidential election defeat, President Jair Bolsonaro making his first statement, signaling his concession to President-elect Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, but also expressing support to demonstrators who have been blocking major roads across the country, even the airport. NBC's Marissa Parra has more on this historic election.
Tonight, anger boiling in Brazil, a symptom of a contentious presidential election. Current President Jair Bolsonaro's supporters unwilling to accept his narrow but decisive defeat. In the days following his loss to opponent Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on Sunday, Bolsonaro fell quiet while his supporters grew louder. Amid the unrest, almost 2 days after his election loss, Bolsonaro finally addressed the nation.
Sempre fui rotulado como antidemocrático e, ao contrário dos meus acusadores, sempre joguei dentro das 4 linhas da Constituição.
Just as telling is what Bolsonaro did not say. While his chief of staff said they would begin the transition of power, Bolsonaro never formally conceded, he never recognized his opponent's victory, and he said the protesters are right but should remain peaceful.
I think he is saying these kinds of things just like Trump did in order to send messages to his supporters that he still loves them. If you recall the comment that Donald Trump made on January 6th when he asked them to go home.
Aqui não é caminhoneiro, aqui é Brasil. Protesters carrying flags bearing Bolsonaro's face blocked roads. They blocked highways, facing off with police on roads leading to Sao Paulo airport, even causing flight delays, squeezing the supply to and from major cities in Brazil. How long the protests will persist is not clear, but the impact is, creating an uphill battle for the Silva as he readies to assume power.
With such a divided country, what is Lula's agenda moving forward?
I think he's going to spend a lot of time in the international arena working on climate change, defending the Amazon, ending deforestation. He'll also have to tackle a very complicated economic situation because of inflation and other problems in the country.
Okay. Marissa joins us now live in studio here. So, Marissa, a couple questions. First, has President Bolsonaro reached out to Lula yet? Because, as you reported, it's very ambiguous what he's saying, whether he's conceding or not.
Right. So it's tradition for them to speak to each other directly. However, that has not happened. What we understand is the vice president for Bolsonaro has spoken to the vice president for Lula, promising to help the transition of power, but nothing direct. And as we mentioned in the piece, the chief of staff for Bolsonaro has promised to help the transition of power, but nothing from Bolsonaro yet.
So it looks like some bridges are being built, but we're not right there. I have to ask you about these protests because they're slowing the economy. The economy is already in trouble in Brazil. Is there any sign that the blockades with the truckers or the airports, that's going to be gone come tomorrow?
Yes and no, because if you look at things on the ground right now, they have slowed down a little bit, but that's because of a Supreme Court order in Brazil. So they had ordered for state police to come in, and a lot of the barricades that we were talking about in the piece have been taken down. However, our crews on the scene are telling us that a lot of these truck driving protesters are actually saying they have every intention of going back out come tomorrow once state police are out of there. And tomorrow's a national holiday in Brazil. So they say they're planning on taking the holiday to actually demonstrate in front of military headquarters and demanding that the military take action to keep Bolsonaro in power. So, Tom, yet another day of holding our breath, waiting to see what tomorrow holds.
And we will be watching and reporting all of it. Okay, Marissa, thank you so much. All right, back now with Top Stories newsfeed, and we begin with the investigation in Chicago after a mass shooting on Halloween. Police say at least 14 people were shot in Garfield Park during a drive-by shooting. 3 children among the victims. The group was gathered for a vigil when police say 2 people in a dark SUV opened fire. So far, no arrests have been made there. Now to the rescue with a motorized parachute that was caught on camera. This is a wild story. New video shows a man flying over a canal near Miami when he spots a woman clinging to a sunken car. That man making an emergency landing and calling out for help. A neighbor who heard the commotion helping to pull that woman to safety and calling first responders. That victim is now expected to be okay. And Elon Musk appearing to confirm it will cost to be verified on Twitter. In a tweet, Musk criticizing the current system for getting a blue check mark, writing in part, quote, "Power to the people, blue for $8 a month." In additional tweets, Musk adding paying users will get other perks, including priority in replies, mentions, and searches. He says it's a way to create a revenue stream for Twitter. No word yet on when this change will go into effect. Okay, we turn out of Florida, where it's the first day in the sentencing phase of the Parkland shooting trials. This following the jury's decision to not apply the death penalty. Victims and their families addressing the shooter directly, without restrictions, for the first time in almost 5 years. Sam Brock has those details.
I thought that the devil did not exist until death put us in front in this path.
All day, the pain poured out.
You don't know me, but you tried to kill me.
You are a revolting entity.
Parents, family members, survivors speaking without restrictions on time or subject directly to the man who killed their loved ones.
I wish no peace for you. I wish nothing but pain.
I am disappointed and disgusted with the verdict that was handed to you. You do not deserve the best case scenario.
The deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history to reach trial ended without a death penalty verdict because there wasn't a unanimous decision, as Florida requires.
My brother Chris, on February 14th, died a hero. You, however, you will die as nothing because you are nothing.
Some parents using the time to lambast the defense, which they say misrepresented the killer's lack of access to mental health care.
This individual didn't fall off the grid. He was the grid. He was getting every service that they offered. That totaled hundreds of hours of therapy.
Ultimately, those here left with one simple feeling: emptiness.
I am broken. I am broken, and I am broken.
Tomorrow afternoon, we'll hear from a few more families, and then the sentencing, life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. Tom, many people are going to be asking the question, why was there no death penalty here? As recently as 2016 in Florida, you only needed a simple majority of jurors. But because of the fact that the Supreme Court struck down part of the law, they had to reconfigure it in 2017. And now, like almost every other state that has capital punishment, Florida requires a unanimous decision. Tom, back to you.
Okay, Sam, you feel for all of those victims and those family members. Coming up, the critical election underway in Israel. Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu looking to mount a comeback despite facing criminal corruption charges. We'll have the latest results coming in at this hour. Next. Back now with an update out of Israel, and quite the scene tonight in Jerusalem. We'll take you there in just seconds. But first, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hoping for a comeback as Israel votes in its 5th election in 4 years. This with the help of the far-right Bloc Party. Polls predict another political deadlock, though voters still turning up in record numbers. It's unclear if any of the blocs will retain enough of a majority to form a government. NBC's Raf Sanchez is at Netanyahu's election night rally in Jerusalem. Raf.
Tom, the early exit polls are showing good news for Benjamin Netanyahu. They predict he will return as prime minister at the head of a narrow right-wing government. And here at his election night rally, you can see they are celebrating. But Netanyahu himself is treating these exit polls with caution. He knows a lot could change. If they do hold, though, and if he is on the way back to the prime minister's office, that would be the capstone of an extraordinary political comeback.
Tonight, Benjamin Netanyahu back on the ballot and hoping to take back power. Today's election offering him a chance to regain the office he lost just over a year ago, when a coalition of opposition parties united to bring an end to his latest 12-year reign as prime minister. But that coalition collapsed this summer, triggering yet another election and a chance for a Netanyahu comeback. That prospect dividing the country and the voters we met.
I feel that his time's up.
People are saying, I'm tired of Netanyahu, let's vote for somebody else. They don't actually want a Jewish country in the same way that I see it.
Netanyahu, a candidate, but also a defendant, on trial right now for criminal corruption, accusations he denies. In his ambition, Netanyahu has made what some Israelis see as a deal with the devil, an election pact with Israel's extreme right.
Netanyahu's allies, the far-right Jewish Power Party, are holding a rally here in Tel Aviv tonight. But across the street, there are dozens of anti-racist protesters who have gathered to demonstrate against them.
Most polls show far-right parties winning 10% of the seats this election, seats that Netanyahu will surely need to form a coalition government. Their surge partly a response to an Arab party entering Israel's ruling coalition last year, a first in Israeli history. In return for the far-right's support, Netanyahu says he's prepared to give a cabinet post to this man, Jewish Power's leader, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Ben-Gvir was convicted in magistrate's court 15 years ago for inciting racism and supporting a terrorist group while carrying anti-Arab signs at a protest. His spokesman insists he's changed.
He's become one of Israel's most influential, most successful trial attorneys, defense attorneys. He's become a civil rights attorney. And yeah, as a kid, as a young man, he faced a charge. And
you say as a kid, this is 2007. He was a grown man by then.
Still in his 20s.
So what are you saying? He's changed? He's not the man he was when he was convicted for racism?
That's what he says.
Ben-Gvir was 31 at the time of his conviction. Last month, he pulled a gun in a confrontation with Palestinians, he says in self-defense. Netanyahu's opponents say his deal will give the far right control of the government.
I don't want to even think about it.
Mirav Michaeli is a cabinet minister and a leader of the center-left Labour Party.
It is going to be so harmful for Israel if we have such extreme right-wing people in cabinet, in government.
Okay, Raf, the polls we know closed there just a couple of hours ago. I want to go back to something that we saw there in your report. What exactly is the status of Netanyahu's corruption trial?
It's ongoing. So Netanyahu is both a candidate to be prime minister and a defendant in a criminal corruption trial. It's something that his opponents say totally disqualifies him. His supporters say it is a witch hunt. And some of his political allies have suggested that if he gets back into power, they will find a way to retroactively give him immunity and effectively cancel cancel this trial, which critics say would be a major blow to the idea that no one in Israel is above the law. Tom?
And Raph, it's actually similar to something we talked about earlier in the night when it comes to Brazil. I do want to ask you, though, what are his chances of becoming prime minister? And what would that mean for the relationship with the U.S. going forward?
So the exit polls are suggesting he could be back in, albeit with a very, very narrow majority. This is being watched extremely closely in Washington, Tom. A lot of people are very concerned, not so much about Netanyahu coming back as prime minister, but coming back with the support of the far right, putting far right ministers into his cabinet. The State Department told us it is up to Israeli voters to choose who their government is. But if they do get into the cabinet, the Biden administration is going to have some tough choices of its own, including will they sit down with these people who have such a long history of racism and extremism? Tom?
Raph Sanchez from Jerusalem tonight for us. Raph, thank you. Now to top stories, Global Watch and Iran holding public trials for 1,000 people charged in those massive protests we've been following. Tehran's Chief Justice saying charges including assaulting and killing security forces and burning public property are included. It comes amid an escalating and deadly crackdown on those demonstrations. It began after the death of a woman following her arrest by the country's morality police. Now to a groundbreaking meeting between the presidents of Colombia and Venezuela today. Colombia's Gustavo Petro visiting Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro in Caracas. It's the first time the presidents of the two nations have met, get this, in 6 years. Petro is working to fulfill a campaign promise of improving relations with neighboring Venezuela, the two talking about trade and immigration after Colombia reopened their shared border. And millions of people across Mexico today celebrating Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. Thousands taking to the streets for the multi-day celebration. Look at that, honoring loved ones who have died. Families placing pictures of the departed with candles on altars and outside parades filled with music, dancing, and skeleton masks. The nationwide celebration will continue through tomorrow. All right, we thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas here in New York. Stay right there. There's more news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.